What up, though? My name is KG the Kid, and you have officially tuned in to Crowned Confessions and Conversations, where you can expect authentic discussion about life, relationships, current events, and everything in between, all from a faith perspective. Let's get it. What up, though? You have officially tuned back into Crown Confessions and Conversations. Uh, I am still KG the Kid. I'm excited to be back with another episode. I know I've been gone for a minute. I've just really been. One thing about the podcast piece of doing this as a whole, I'm starting to realize that I want to be extremely intentional. And if you know me, then you know that's typically like anything in my life. I want to be intentional about, but I really, really want to be intentional about recording in regards to definitely creating more content, but also being intentional about what I'm actually recording about. And this is really no shade to anybody, but I feel like I'm in a demographic that is so saturated. Like everybody and their mama got a podcast now. And even when I decided to start it, everybody and mama had a podcast, but I've always wanted to be very intentional about making sure that I am discussing and giving topics and things that people aren't talking about on a common basis. And I know some of that is also the fact that I have a very different perspective on a lot of things when it comes to faith and culture and all those things that, collide with each other and intersect. But I always want to be really, really intentional. And that's part of why I have so many people fussing at me like, yo, when's the next episode of the podcast coming up? I got y'all. I ain't forget about y'all. I just have to do things the way that makes sense to me. But, definitely looking to be more consistent with how often I produce because I'm grateful to actually have a following of people who are quite interested in following the podcast. So shout out to y'all. Shout out to the listeners, the people who are actually down for the kid and really participating in this portion of what I'm building over here in these streets. I'm hoping that you don't hear the trash people as much, but you never know. I'm recording this in my house. I'm not in no studio. I'm flat out recording this at the crib. So, you get 100% of what's actually going on in my real life. But I hope you all been well. I hope things are going great. It's the summer. It's June. It's the last few days of June. So we're getting ready to go into July. And the summer has been very interesting this year. It's just been wild. But it's been wild in a lot of growth ways. I'm an educator, but I work in higher ed. So people are always like, oh, you get the summer off. Absolutely not. I don't. That's the one thing I knew that I would have to give up in deciding not to go into the classroom, because shout out to all my classroom educators. Y'all enjoy y'all summer break, because let me tell you, the kid is not built for the classroom. I'm just not. I salute everybody who does the classroom stuff every day. That's not my anointing. I don't have it, especially in the times that we're living in. I'm not built for it. But that's a whole topic for a different day. We're going to hop right into today's topic. Once again, yet another episode where I'm by myself, which is interesting. Shout out to Roddy Rod. My brother from another. One of the things that he told me when I first told him that I was ready to do the whole podcast thing was, he's like, there's going to be some episodes where you're going to have to do it by yourself. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm hoping those are few far in between. And he was like, nah, sis, you going to be doing it by yourself a little bit more than what you think. And not even just on some, I don't have people, because I have plenty of people who could definitely hop on here. But I guess one of the things that I'm learning about in this experience is that there are just some things that I have understanding on that God is like, it's okay for you to do this and get on here and talk by yourself about what your experience is. There's still something to learn from you and who you are and what you've gone through and what you're growing through. And I guess for me, I guess this is a part, like, people don't believe this, but I'm kind of shy. Like, I'm actually very shy. I'm very much an introvert. You know, if I speak too many words throughout the day, by the end of the evening, I need to go and sit by myself and recharge. I'm very much not a social butterfly. And people always seem shocked when we talk about that. Like, when I talk about that with like my cousins or my friends. But the truth of the matter is I'm an introvert. So typically, if I can like have something or somebody here to bounce things off of, it's very helpful for me. But here we are. Clearly there's something I need to learn in this experience, especially because of what I'm talking about today. So this week's episode is called It's Ghetto Here. 10 things they didn't tell me about growth and healing. This episode is specifically dedicated to my therapeutic process. I know I've mentioned before, if you follow the actual brand, if you follow Confessions from a Tilted Crown, then you have read somewhere, I'm sure, that I have been in therapy now since, I have been in therapy since November. I have just, I don't know. So let me go back a little bit. So I have been in therapy since November of 2021. It is now June of 2022. So it's been a little over 6 months. I've learned a lot in therapy. I should have actually started therapy years ago. But I was really dragging my feet. That's just being completely honest. I was dragging my feet. And because I was dragging my feet, I prolonged the situation. So I'm very fortunate because a good chunk of my friends, quite a few of my friends actually work in mental health. So in some way or another, they're therapists. They do a gamut of different things, but they're really big on mental health. And a lot of my friends who don't work in mental health are actually in therapy as well. And for years, they have been encouraging me and pushing me and challenging me to start therapy. Just because, like, part of why I decided to go ahead and start therapy was because I felt like I had finally gotten to the end of my own tools and I knew I needed other tools. So, I felt like I needed to outsource some things in order to continue to grow, in order to continue to heal. I've been on a journey of healing for the last decade. And it's a process. Healing is a process. It's the things that you have to unlearn, and really dealing with those things and being honest with those things has taken me time and it's taken honesty. But I really felt like I had gotten to the end of my own abilities and I felt like I needed to add something or somebody in. So shout out to my friends who have very much been encouraging me to finally make this leap once I decided to do so. I was very fortunate to have because my friends do this, to have resources at hand. One of the most important resources for my journey in particular was my homegirl, Dr. Taco. Shout out to Dr. Taco. Dr. Taco and I have been friends since we were sixth graders, and she really is truly like one of my sisters. But I was telling her, and she was like, yo, I'm so excited for you. Let's try to figure out what's going to be the best, like, who does it make sense for you to go to and go through and do therapy with or whatever else. So, she talked me through the whole process of looking into my insurance and, and she actually referred somebody. And I couldn't have imagined how much this process would change my life. So shout out to Dr. B, who is my therapist. I'm not going to necessarily get into exactly who she is, but that's none of your business. But I want to say a very loud thank you to Dr. B, because walking through this therapeutic process with her has been very much, it's necessary. It's very much necessary. I've learned a lot about myself. I've also learned a lot about why therapy is such an amazing tool. I've also realized why people struggle so much in therapy. One thing that I definitely want to add as an extra caveat before I get into the 10 things that I know for sure I want to share is finding a good therapist is like dating, honestly. I'm very fortunate because first shot, I found an amazing person to walk through this journey with. But I talk to people sometimes and they're like, man, I wish my experience was like that. It can be. You have to do what's necessary to find a place and a space and a person that you feel comfortable enough to walk along this journey with. And I'm fortunate because I was led to Dr. B in her practice, and it just worked out. Like, I've learned a whole lot. But part of why I titled this episode "It's Ghetto" here is because if you know me, then you know that very often when things happen, and I don't necessarily just little strange stuff that just, good, indifferent, whatever. I mean, well, not necessarily good, but indifferent things when they happen, I tend to say, well, that's ghetto. Well, in therapy, I have spent a lot of time talking about things and expressing things. And one of the expressions is the fact that, and sometimes in therapy, when things happen or questions are asked of me, I'm like, that is so ghetto. And Dr. B actually pushes me and challenges me to define what ghetto is. And what I've learned is I actually use that term interchangeably for a lot of things. And I guess I'll get a little further into that once I get down this list. But I have 10 things I want to share with you about growth and healing that I've learned. And hopefully you can identify with some of them. So, number 1, I still need God's help. I'm in therapy. I'm going through this therapeutic process. I enjoy it. It's not always fun, so maybe enjoy isn't the word I want to use, but I'm committed to it. And often, as a Christian, as a believer, as a person of faith, sometimes you meet people or interact with people who feel as though people can't have Jesus and therapy. I know the Perrys had this real, I think it was, what is Jackie's husband's name, y'all? Dang it. Preston, did the whole movement, you can have Jesus in therapy. And I totally 100% agree. I believe that, there are things and people that God put in place on this earth in order to help us, operate in this world, but also to help position us in ways where we can see and experience the fullness of what he has for us. And that's what therapy has been for me. I still need God in this experience. And truthfully, I spend a lot of time talking about how my faith and this therapeutic process collide and intersect in my life. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that from a sense of also going back to what I just said not too long ago and, finding the right person and the right therapist to go through, but also being honest enough with yourself and being, 100. Like, that was one of the things I said very much on, even in the beginning of talking and, getting like the consultation with my therapist. One of the things I made very clear was that my faith was important to me. So she knew from jump that my relationship with God was going to play a big part in how I perceive and process things and go through this experience. And that's why I can say that even in this therapeutic process, I still recognize that I need God's help, because the other part of it is therapy also comes with the implementation portion. So in implementing these things, in order to have healthier relationships and be a healthier person all around in my own life, I still need God's help to implement these things when it comes to breaking cycles and really stepping outside of the norm of what I know or how I normally cope with things. So that's point 1. I still need God's help, and I still use God's help every day, all day. Point 2, healing is not easy. It requires work. This has been such a significant lesson within itself, because I'm going to just keep it a buck with y'all. Therapy is hard some days. Like, some days I literally get off the calls or I come, I leave Dr. B's office, and I'm like, I'm tired. I need a nap, a sandwich, a hug, and a good cry. Like, it's hard, and it's hard because therapy is pushing me to unlearn how I have done things for 32 years, essentially. Maybe not that long, but the habits and the coping mechanisms that I have picked up that may not necessarily be the healthiest. There are moments in this experience where I am extremely challenged and pushed beyond myself. And I remember talking to my homegirl Jen one day, like, cause she works in mental health. And I called her one day after, like, I think we ended up talking one day after therapy or something. And she was like, what's going on? Like, you just sound exhausted. And I was like, I don't know. Cause all I did was I went to therapy today. Like, I went to therapy, I'm working on some stuff for my computer, but like, I just feel exhausted. And she told me, she was like, yo, you sound like you've done some really heavy lifting today. Maybe you just need to go take a nap. And it's okay if you need to take a nap. And I went and took the nap. And when I say I felt so much better after this nap, because emotional stuff of the heart and things that we go through and walk through in our lives, like, that's heavy lifting often. And it takes work. It takes me, I could sit in these sessions and listen all day, but if I'm not actually implementing these things, then I'm not going to see a change in my world or a change in myself. And that's why I say that work piece is so important. So I read a quote on Facebook the other day, and I thought it was just very, very significant to this particular point. It says, nobody warns you about the amount of mourning in growth. I never got a chance to look up who came up with that, but I think that is so important, because growth comes often with unlearning, and unlearning often comes with the reality of very often things happen to us and we experience life in a way that sometimes we push ourselves or allow ourselves to fall into bad habits. So like I said, the whole is ghetto thing. One of the things that I've learned in therapy is that I have a tendency to deflect. And it's a coping mechanism. Like, when you grow up around Southern women, no shade. I love my aunts, my aunts and my family, but my family is from the South. And when you grow up around women, specifically women of color, we're often taught how to deflect things because, you got to be strong. You got to be independent. You got to be able to keep stuff going. And the truth of the matter is, some of the stuff that I have had said to me as a kid growing up, child, it was the ghetto. And the ghetto meaning it was rough. And there are some things that I have like really come to terms with that I felt like I had to build up a wall to get through life in certain arenas and in certain discussions when dealing with certain people. So it took work and it took an unlearning, and I had to mourn sometimes because I have to push myself to undo or unlearn certain coping mechanisms, like being able to be honest about my feelings, and even, when things happen, and being more prone to be honest about the fact that there are certain things that do hurt my feelings, and still recognize that, one, I'm human, and two, even in that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to stay broken in that place, or that somebody hurting my feelings in an experience means that they're a horrible person. But maybe they haven't learned how to cope or deal for themselves, or maybe they don't even understand the weight behind what they're saying. So that's point 2. Point 3 is forgiveness is for me. You just reap the benefits. This is such an important lesson for me because forgiveness has always been something until recent years that I very much struggled with. And it plays hand in hand, honestly, with my relationship with my faith, as well as my relationship with my therapeutic process, because forgiveness is something that I really learned the depths of at my church. My pastor played a very, very pivotal role in me really understanding what forgiveness is. I struggled with forgiveness for a long time because I just couldn't wrap my mind around somebody doing something to me and me not feeling some type of way about it. But I had to realize that it was a choice and that it was a decision. And honestly, shout out to Pastor Andrea Ellis, because she tells me this and has told me this over and over again. You have to forgive by faith. Sometimes it's never about what you feel, because if somebody does you wrong or makes you feel indifferent or anything else, guess what? You gonna feel how you feel. But forgiveness isn't about them. It's about me. Forgiveness, I have to forgive in order to be forgiven. And therapy has pushed that for me, because I've realized that there are things in people who may never ask for forgiveness, but I still have to let it go, because to a certain extent it's become a stumbling block for me. And I ain't got time for that. Like, I have so many things that God has already set out for me that he wants to see come to fruition for my life. And that's why he has these amazing plans for me. But when I forgive, I'm in a better place. When I forgive, I feel lighter. When I forgive, my capacity is widened to take on more, because I'm not holding on to what was done to me. Forgiveness takes a level of wisdom as well, because I can forgive and I can let go, and I can still grow beyond that experience and wisdom that comes from that experience, which tells me how to not allow myself to fall back into a circumstance or a situation that could possibly yell for me to come out of my character. And I can't say it pulls me out of my character, because there's still a level of accountability that I have to take on about what it is I allow myself to do. I can't be accountable for how everybody else responds, but I can be accountable for how Kendra responds. And that's why I said forgiveness is for me. You just reap the benefit. So when I choose to forgive, I know not only am I forgiven, but I'm also positioning myself in order to receive more from God and receive the fullness of what he has for me. But I'm also freeing myself up to not be carrying around a weight or a heaviness that at that point has nothing else to do with that person. I ain't gotta be no fool, but I can definitely forgive. So that's point 3. Point 4, I am worthy of love and care, not just because of what I can do, simply because of who I am. That was a heavy one for me. I think this was something that was brought up maybe a month and a half ago during a therapy session. I realized that part of what I had placed my worth on was contingent upon what I could do for other people, not about who I was as a person and how I'm able to show up in the world for myself first and everybody else after. Part of this experience has also been about a journey of self-love and deepening that experience to make sure that I know that I'm worthy, right? So that lesson itself, it hit really hard. I think as women, we are often taught to do, and we're taught how to show up, and we're taught how to serve everybody else. Even in Christianity, we are taught, to love God. Absolutely. That period. Love God with all your heart. Love others, to extend the love that God has for us to other people. We don't talk enough about the significance of loving ourselves. And I know I talked about this a couple weeks ago in one of the reels that I posted on the Confessions from a Tilted Crown page. But we don't discuss enough the significance of, if God talks about us being fearfully and wonderfully made, if we are made in the image of the Father, if the Lord is our shepherd, like all these scriptures and all of these confessions and these promises of who God has called us to be, He has called us to be the head and not the tail. Why do we struggle so bad with loving ourselves? It's really an assessment that we all need to take, essentially, to really get back to, when I show up for myself first, I show up for everybody else better. But I also have this understanding that when I show up for myself first, I also set a new level of boundaries when it comes to the relationships and how I deal and operate and relate to other people. I show up better for everybody else because I'm dealing with myself in a better way. And everybody knows me, like I'm a community person. I'm really big. I'm the type of person where I will give you the shirt off my back and not think about it, because that's just my style. That's just how I'm built. But I'm learning how, okay, Kendra, maybe you don't need to get your shirt off the back off necessarily, if that means that you just gonna be out here uncovered and undone. I'm worthy of love because of who I am, not just because of what I can do. It's not about, the graphics I can make for other people. It's not about, the speaking engagement I can show up for other people. I'm simply worthy because God says so. And that's that, like that thing hit. I ain't gonna hold y'all up. Like when I heard myself say that for the first time about myself, I cried, because it's not something that I was taught or something that I really thought about. The fact that I had started basing my importance and significance in this life off of what I could do for other people instead of what God has already done for me and what He's doing in me and how He created me and how He loved me from the beginning of time. Whew, okay. 5, growth is a conscious choice and it comes with discomfort. Growth is ghetto. Growth is real ghetto. And when I say it, I literally mean growth is ghetto in the sense of it's uncomfortable. Growing beyond what you know and what you've known or what you've done all your life is not a great feeling all the time. Because sometimes there are certain things about us, I like to call them screws and corks. There are screws and corks about us that everybody has that we think is right, or is just the right way of doing stuff because that's what we've known all our lives. And the truth of the matter is, when growth comes into play, growth will sometimes call you out and call you to the rug and tell you like, yeah, nah, that's not okay. The way you operate in that space, it's not all right. I know that this is what you've been doing all your life. I know that this is how you see your people get down. I know that this is how you see other people operate, but nah, G, that's not gonna work. And for me, like I said, being a strong Black woman, being raised by a strong Black woman, raised around other strong Black women, there are some things that I've had to learn and just be like, ooh, that's tight. That's tight. When I have no other terms for anything, typically it's tight. I'm not going to hold you up. But being honest about growth, it's a conscious choice, and I say that even more because I've realized that one of the things that Dr. B talked to me about when we first had our first consultation was, she said, hey, just so you know, if you're committing to this process and you're really going to do this work, just know, just as you change and you grow, and recognize that other people around you may not have that same revelation. You're still going back into a world where things in everybody else's life is still completely the same, even though you are evolving. And, I really didn't take heed to that until I actually saw myself growing and changing and really realized, like, oh, I'm committed to this journey, but this isn't everybody else's experience. My pastor gave the example a couple days ago, like when somebody goes into rehab and, they're away from their environment for 30 to 60 days, 90 days, whatever, then they are put back into real life. And you've changed. You've been away from this place in this space, but this place in this space and these people here are still the same. So now you have to make a conscious choice and a decision about how you decide to show up in these moments. And sometimes that can be really, really uncomfortable because I am being intentional about how I operate with people. And some of these people are still the same exact people they have been all my life. And it can be intimidating, and it can be hurtful sometimes too, because if I'm working, vulnerability is a thing for me, something that I'm definitely working on. And I've gotten better over the years, but through this process, I've learned a whole different level of vulnerability. And, in our community as people, sometimes we can say some stuff and it can be a little rough, and I still have to show up as my authentic self at this point in my life. And sometimes that can be really, really uncomfortable. But do I go back to the mechanism of deflecting, or do I just continue to walk out in front of, myself or whoever is watching, or just really, but showing up and operating and walking out in front of myself because this is what I've committed myself to. So that can be extremely uncomfortable, but it's necessary. 6, addressing it doesn't make you overly emotional. Like I said, this goes back to that vulnerability piece. I have had a tendency to allow things to happen and not address them, which is very interesting at the same time, because I am really big on communication. But I also operate from this place where very often I haven't trusted myself the way that I need to trust myself. And I've learned that there is balance in being able to communicate my feelings and my emotions in the right time, in the right place, with the right people. And I don't have to feel like anything is being taken away from me. So addressing it doesn't make me overly emotional. If anything, it helps me grow beyond where I am in that moment. So this is something I've had to implement, especially with my closest relationships. And it's been received really, really well, because people are actually like, well, dang, I never knew you felt like that. So I've learned a lot. They've learned a lot. We've learned a lot. And I feel like my relationships have gotten stronger because of what I have been willing to allow myself to be honest about in that area. 7, commit, engage, apply, repeat. Like I said, these are the 10 things that they didn't tell me about growth and healing. So, I have to commit to this process. And it's not something that I just get to commit to one time. I have to commit to it daily. And I think this is part of why I feel like this therapeutic process has been very similar to my walk as a Christian, because truth of the matter is I committed to Christ forever ago, but I constantly have to recommit myself in order to make sure that in moments where I want to act outside of what I know I should, I still push myself beyond those moments in order to operate the way that God has called me to. Therapy has been very much the same process. I have to commit to not just showing up for my sessions, but I have to commit to actually being a participant, which is the engagement piece, and the application itself. So it's one thing to sit and talk about these things and discuss these things. It's another thing to actually be present in my sessions, but it's a whole nother thing to apply the things that I am learning in therapy. One of those things has been knowing when I should just bow out for the sake of my own mental health. I have a tendency to be a person who, I don't like debating with people, but I'm very much a person who I will suffer for the sake of trying to prove a point sometimes. And sometimes that point is just trying to be there for other people more than I'm trying to be there for myself, which isn't fair to me. So one of the things that I have learned how to apply since being committed and engaging in therapy is it's okay for me to say that's enough and I can just leave. So I had a situation recently where something was said to me and it wasn't even something that was crazy. It was just something that was a little like, ooh, oh, okay, all right. And instead of just sitting there and being like, I'm giving this person the benefit of the doubt, like, no, they would never say this or do this or trying to hurt me or harm me. I just decided to recognize their own humanity in that moment and the fact that, okay, this person might just be having a rough day. But just in case this person isn't having a rough day and this is just who they are, or even if they are just having a rough day, that does not mean that I still have to sit here and take whatever they want to say and whatever they want to do. So I removed myself. And if I felt good about it. I felt good about my choice. I felt good about my decision. But that was just the one time. There have been times where I have had to implement that and it didn't always feel good. So that's where the repeat process comes. I have to consciously make the decision to commit, engage, apply, and repeat over and over and over again. Point 8, I show up better when I am healed. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me in the last several months and are like, Kendra, you're glowing. Or Kendra, I just love like this. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm loving it. Like something's different about you. You feel different. You show up different. Like you sound different. Did you get some new hair? Like what's going on? And all I can say honestly is that I feel like I'm in a different place because I feel like I am walking through healing in some things, in some areas in my life. Like I'm talking about stuff from my childhood when I was like 4 and 5 years old, and now I'm 32. And it feels so good to be on the other side of those things and be able to even talk about those things from a place of victory, because part of my therapeutic process has been acknowledging that I made it through. It may not have felt good, but I'm on the other side of it. And now I'm in a place where not only am I on the other side of it, but I'm not afraid to really look at what it was that happened and be able to talk about the good, the bad, and the indifferent. It's still a process. It's still something I'm learning and moving through, but I show up better when I'm healed. I feel like I'm a better aunt. I'm a better sister. I'm a better friend, a better cousin. My relationships with so many people have changed because I don't feel like I have to be so hard about some of the things that I have experienced. And I'm really starting to feel better about those things and how I show up in the world. So I show up better when I'm healed. 9, life still be lifing. They ain't changed, but I have. That still goes back to the point of just kind of talking about how I've learned that in this therapeutic process, I'm the one changing. Life is still life and life is still happening. So as I'm healing, as I'm growing, as I'm being honest, as I'm shedding away with things that no longer serve me, life is still happening. There are still other things being added onto my plate. I'm still learning and growing, and I'm still addressing things. And some of those things are things that have already been addressed that we have to circle back to. But that's why I'm committed to the process. And I think that was one of the hardest things, because one day I actually applied something that I learned in therapy, and I realized that, dang, like, this person is still very much treating me like trash in this particular topic. And I don't like how I feel about that. But I'm the one that's changing. I'm the one that's healing. I'm the one that's committed. I'm the one that's engaged. I'm the one that's applying these things. I'm still experiencing life while other people are still very much being themselves. And point 10, I deserve this healing. To be whole and in alignment with myself is God's will for my life. Part of that, I think about Mark 5, where it talks about the miracles that Jesus performed, specifically where it talks about, Jairus' daughter, and God, Jairus literally, talking about, like, Lord, I believe, but, I need your help in this moment. And that's why I say, like, I still need God's help. But also in chapter 5, where it talks about the woman with the issue of blood. And this experience has been very much about faith for me. It's been about faith in the sense that God, in order to get to therapy, it was a setup. It was a setup from jump. Like I said, even just being able to be in a place where I know so many people who are in therapy and feel like, I don't know how I feel about my therapist or whatever else. God knew his daughter, and he knew his daughter well enough to know that if I had finally committed to deciding that I was going to do this, that I needed to make the right choice the first time when it came to picking who I was going to make this journey with. And I'm so grateful that he knew his daughter that well, because he knew very easily I would have got real distracted and been like, okay, Lord, never mind. But I feel and recognize that everything in my life is a part of what God has for me, because I invite God's presence in on everything that I do. So when I look in Mark 5 in verse 34, and it says, then Jesus said to her, daughter, because you dared to believe, your faith has healed you. Go with peace in your heart and be free from your suffering. That thing right there is exactly where I feel like God is positioning me. And if I'm honest, that's where I feel like I am walking out in my life. I deserve to be healed, because that's what God has for me. Healing is a promise that I have access to as one of his daughters. And I'm just so grateful that I'm finally at a point in my life where I recognize that healing is not just something that I have to pray and believe for everybody else. And it doesn't just have to be healing in my own life as a physical or a financial blessing, but really it can be the emotional and the spiritual piece of my life. And I show up better because of that. So I'm grateful, and I'm just very thankful that I'm able to recognize that I deserve to be made whole. And it's still very much in alignment, because it is a promise for God, which means it's in an alignment, in full alignment with what he has for me. So yeah, those are my 10 things that they didn't tell me about growth and healing. And that's why it's Ghetto here, because like I said, I have some moments where I'm being stretched, I'm being pushed, I'm being pulled beyond myself, but I really wouldn't have it any other way. And I'm grateful for this experience. I hope that this episode helps you if therapy is something that you are thinking about or considering, I would love to be able to talk to you maybe individually or whatever else about a little bit more about what my process or my experience has been. And like I said, I'm very fortunate to have access to a number of different resources. So maybe you don't have insurance, or maybe you're not sure about what your insurance will cover. Please hit me up. I'm down to do the research with you, because having this level of support has been such a blessing to my life. And I want to see and hear more people, especially Black women, utilize the benefits of going to therapy and going through therapy, and really remembering and seeing the fullness that healing is what God has for you. So thank you again to my home team, the village, for holding me down and pushing me. I'm sorry that I'm so hard-headed and it took me so long to be obedient. But y'all already know what y'all get when y'all get me, and y'all love me, and I appreciate you all so much. And like I said earlier, thank you again, Dr. B, for being committed to this journey on me and put with me and pushing me consistently to go and grow beyond myself. And I hope you have learned something from, this conversation. And like I said, any way I could be a blessing to somebody else or a resource, please hit me up. And I'm out. I appreciate you for tuning in. I hope something that was said encouraged you and reminded you of God's plan for your life. Remember, keep your hands clean and don't forget to adjust your crown.